So this is the first edition of the Khoodeelaar campaign, World Exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street. Now, Fleet Street, of course, is regularly referred to by the private eye fortnightly, which is dated today. It's issue number 1536, and it's dated the 4th of December, that is today, till 17th of December. So that's a kind of topical headline on the front cover, which sums up a kind of moderate view of Boris Johnson. But it is a moderate view. It's not really kind of biting. And the section in the eye, private lie, that is called Street of Shame, which is on page 11. It's not talking about really any biting stuff either. Except kind of reference to Tom Newton Dunn, who used to be the Sun's political editor. He's now doing the job as Times Radio's chief political commentator. And Newton Dunn is mentioned as reporting that Boris Johnson didn't think that the bullying allegations against Priti Patel were important. And there is a piece about the Rod Liddell versus the BBC's Newsnight, Emily Maitlies. So the private eye is actually supporting Emily Maitlies against Rod Liddell. And they're doing that by saying that Rod Liddell actually is showing double standards when he's supporting the bully, Priti Patel, but accusing Emily Maitlies of bullying him. So there is no really any in-depth analysis of Fleet Street in the private eye. And, their private eye or private lie is retailing secondhand stuff. For example, they're doing in that kind of section, which is page 11 and 12 of the Street of Shame. They're talking about Suzanne Moore and her kind of departure from the Guardian, and the Guardian editor, Catherine Weiner, maintaining her silence over the whole thing. And I've got a piece from the 1980s, mid-1980s heyday, and Labour briefing, and they're digging this up in order to show that they can look at the hypocrisy of the Times writer, Janice Turner, who used her Times column last month, that is November, to urge Keir Starmer to finish off the toxic Corbyn. And they're saying that along with Corbyn, in the mid-1980s, the Sussex Student Union official, Janice Turner, in the mid-1980s, supported the 1984 kind of demand to stop Kinnock's kind of role as leader and that kind of thing. But what the private lie is not doing is doing any rigorous analysis on all the failures that affect all the people, failures of Fleet Street, that is, that affect all the people that are supposedly the readers and subscribers of the Fleet Street titles. And there is no political analysis, there is no ethical analysis, there is no moral analysis, there is no policy analysis, there is nothing in the private lies street of shame about the role of the Fleet Street papers in suppressing democracy and telling lies. So it can be called street of shame, but there is no real digging of the shameful behavior. And as we posted yesterday, the comment by the Welsh Labour MP, Chris Bryant, was kind of being trendy and stupid, because we pointed out that being a socialist, as he claims to be, didn't have anything to do with asking for Eton to let girls in. Eton is not some kind of socialist kind of institution that is denying girls the right to be there, to be a socialist. Eton is the opposite of socialism. So we said that the call by Chris Bryant was stupid, and the correct call should be to scrap Eton, shut it down. Not just Eton, that may be a symbolic kind of act if Eton was shut down. But all these schools, private schools, should be shut down. That should be the democratic thing, not even socialist. That is democratic thing to do. So here is a piece by the Daily Mail saying that Gavin Williamson, who attended a comprehensive school in Scarborough, told Radio 4's Today program, "I'd be very much in favor of Eton taking girls. I think that would be a good step forward." Now, the idiotic Williamson and the idiotic Chris Bryant show their idiocies. I mean, it's not about education. Letting in girls into Eton is like calling for letting in girls into a man's club. I mean, that is nothing to do with the ability that people have to buy the membership of these clubs, and similarly Eton. That's all. I mean, those who have the money, or the parents who have the money, can pay the £42,000 or so fees, annual fees for Eton. And that will be perpetuating the corrupt kind of ties. Eton ties, that is not socialist, that is not democratic. Most certainly nothing to do with education. And this item about the Priti Patel fury, about Star's insult to Windrush victims, that is a kind of treble-barreled kind of lie. Priti Patel is not supporting the victims of Windrush injustice. She is the Home Secretary, she is the Interior Minister in post in the department that created the Windrush kind of scandal. And it is the Home Office, the Interior Department, that created the Hostile Environment Directive. So the people who she is accusing of insulting the Windrush victims are not in any way supporting any of that. In fact, they are pointing out the racism of the deportation program. They are not supporting criminals, and they could not support the criminals. And as we said yesterday, the point is that there are thousands of criminals in this country, in Britain, and they're not going to be deported anywhere, and nobody is going to even talk about any need for them to be deported. So where is the kind of balance? Where is the point? What is the point of asking or saying that the stopping of the Jamaican criminals from being deported has in any way insulted ordinary Jamaican people, or the people of the Windrush generation, or linked with the Windrush generation, that have suffered genuinely, kind of documented and undeniably evident and evidenced and corroborated injustice by the racist policies of the UK Interior Ministry and Department, and successive UK departments, not only just the Home Office, Interior Ministry, but other departments as well. And the Daily Mail is doing the same thing as the twisted logic of Rod Liddell. He says, Home Secretary tells Mail of her outrage over offensive fight by celebrities to keep Jamaican killers and rapists in the UK. And then she says, and we should read this one, because this is the kind of thing that needs to be put on the record. Priti Patel last night accused Labour MPs and do-gooding celebrities of insulting Windrush victims. Now, do-gooding used to be the previous kind of phrase until recently. The racists created the word woke. Do-gooding was for decades the phrase of abuse by racists and criminals in power and right-wingers who objected to any campaign, any call, any analysis, any demand to end racism, discrimination, and abuse and deprivation of the poorest people in this country, in Britain. So that was the phrase, do-gooding. It's like George W. Bush's father, the George Bush Sr., who gave political currency by attacking what he called political correctness. And immediately after he mouthed that phrase, it became instantly a favorite to be used by racists and anti-democrats and fascists and dictatorial, sub-dictatorial kind of forces in power and politics. So do-gooding is being revived by Priti Patel in the Daily Mail in attacking people who oppose the racist discrimination and the racist kind of bias against people, including Jamaican criminals. None of them, including us, that oppose the racism of the Home Office and the racist treatment, in any way, none of us condone, let alone support the crimes of the criminals. The point in the campaign against the Home Office's racist criteria is about racist discrimination against these criminals. It doesn't alter the fact that they remain criminals, but it doesn't also entitle the Interior Ministry or the UK judicial system or bureaucracy to treat them with racist bias and racist kind of prejudice. So the Daily Mail and Priti Patel are both lying in praising the Windrush generation's contribution as the reply to the accusation that the Priti Patel, the Daily Mail, the Interior Ministry are guilty of racist discrimination. So they are the ones who are actually insulting the Windrush generations. Now, the other thing is that on page 6, it continues on page 6. It says that it has got a double page spread on monsters. They are backing these monsters, the Jamaican monsters, the criminals. And there is no So they're talking about the Labour MPs and the kind of fashion model Naomi Campbell. And there is a 2-page spread next to it celebrating we are beating flu too. That is completely, absolutely unsubstantiated, but completely untruthful parade of propaganda by the Daily Mail for the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal. And they are kind of speculating whether Diana did have an affair with France's former president, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, whose death was reported yesterday, Thursday, the 3rd of December 2020. And there is the typically weird, illogical kind of outrage by the Brexiteer moron, Little John. He says, your bill is 394 billion, service not included. And this is about the public kind of borrowing by Rishi Sunak. This is about the borrowing during the COVID crisis, not the actual amount, because the Daily Mail is not bothering about the actual sum borrowed. And the Daily Mail is full of absolute rubbish and tittle tattle and garbage. And they've got a piece promoting Rishi Sunak's wife. Check her out, Rishi's wife's pricey outfit, that kind of garbage. I mean, that is not reporting about the finance and the financial crisis. And the Daily Mail is typical of the Fleet Street garbage carriers. They're not talking about the people, the gullibles that they say, and it's in this one that they've got a thing on front page of the Daily Star. Could 2020 get any stranger? Hitler wins election. A politician called Adolf Hitler says he has no plans for world domination after sweeping to power. Adolf said his parents named him after the World War II Nazi dictator, not realizing what he stood for. Perhaps they just had a warped sense of humor. He won by a landslide in Namibia. A former Did they not realize what he had done or what he stood for? German colony taking 85% of the votes for a seat on a regional council. Now, Adolf Hitler may have been named by his parents without realizing what Adolf Hitler stood for. But it has been a very long time since Hitler ended his kind of reign, or Hitler's reign was ended. And the world has come to know so many things that Adolf Hitler did. So why did his parents not change his name? I mean, how is this possible that his father named him Adolf Hitler without realizing? I mean, if he hadn't realized what Hitler stood for, how did he come to know about the name? He says, apparently, that it's officially, I mean, it's too late to officially change his name. The fact I have this name does not mean I am striving for world domination. That's not what Hitler is worst named for. It's the genocide, it's the murders and the massacres that he did. That is what he's notorious for, not wanting world domination. Namibia was a German colony from 1884 until sanctions in the Treaty of Versailles after World War I stripped Germany of its possessions and wealth. The nation is still home to a small German-speaking community. So that's the lame excuse, but it is not acceptable at all. And so therefore, like the Daily Mail is full of trash, this is not news that should be presented in that way. And the Daily Beaverbrook is doing the same thing as it does every day. And there is a piece in the Daily Express about Ivanka, Trump's daughter, so-called. Has been quizzed about misuse of cash. I mean, they could quiz her for another 100 years, and they will still not run out of questions to ask her about her misuse of the positions. And this is full of, again, really, about Eton being asked to let in girls. I mean, what do they want this bunch of morons about this call for Eton to let in girls? I mean, they want Margaret Thatcher's and Priti Patel's and Anne Widdecombe's. I mean, is that what they want? More of. And they've got They've got a piece about NHS staff no longer top priority to receive coronavirus vaccine. That is the Guardian. And it has got, continuing, is bogus recognition of black kind of persons. Mariah Carey may be claimed to be a black person, but she is not black where it matters. And they're promoting this other one, number 10's black star player, how JVT won public confidence. I mean, this is the Guardian being trendy in the sickest possible sense. Typical Guardian, sick-makingly trendy and corrupt. And they're not talking about the corruption, the racism that goes on in the system. And they're not talking about why so many people in the care homes who were allowed to die were also of African and Asian kind of origin. And the Mirror, predictably, is running a piece about a so-called poll saying Labour can win back its red wall seats. I mean, that is not necessarily based on a poll. That is going to result from the abject lies by Johnson and his cabal about the 12th of December 2019 general election that was given to him by Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, the most idiotic of voters in the so-called red walls would have not noticed that the Tories hadn't got many seats in the so-called North. Not because people didn't know about them, not because the Tories didn't want to have them, but because they didn't have anything to offer to the North. And that is to do with a lot of what the Tories are about. So the red walls are not going to be won back because of a poll or because of Keir Starmer, but they are going to be won back because they have been lied to, and they were going to find that out when it came to the actual service that the liars promised them. And this I newspaper is stupid. It's running a story. It's like the Victorias, like they've kind of been in competition with the rest of Europe, and they've got the vaccine. There is a piece about the cars. Electric cars, half of all cars must be electric in order to reach 2030 climate goals. That is what the Boris Graf is saying. And it's running the story about NHS staff losing vaccine priority as supply fears hit. Now, how can they be celebrating this arrival of vaccine in the UK if the NHS staff are going to be deprived or being kind of not provided with enough? vaccines that they need. And there is this piece about Johnson, and again promising the world small businesses or businesses. I mean, depends on who the businesses are that he's going to help. And why should it be news? And the Financial Times is doing a thing on the Far East. It's not talking about Asia, it's talking about Far East. Far East does not represent all of Asia, most of Asia anyway. And it says the crunch time is on for Brexit talks. And in sight, that is the end of the crisis or the deadlock in sight. That is what it is saying. And it says that top city executives and sporting stars are exempted from quarantine in England. Now, we have been saying that the vaccine celebration is absolutely wrong and false and untruthful. Now, the Financial Times has on the front page the American specialist in infectious disease. He's saying what we have been saying for days. They just took the data from the Pfizer company, and instead of scrutinizing it really carefully, they said, okay, let's approve it. That's it. And that is absolutely what the agenda has been. And we have been saying it, that they're jubilant for political propaganda purposes, not because of scientific evidence saying that the vaccine will work or that it has been produced by due diligence and due scientific kind of experiment and testing and double checking and all the other things. And they're acknowledging on the editorial piece, the first of the two editorials, the legacy of COVID is a corporate debt mountain. That's putting it very modestly. And a lot of propaganda for companies and hardly anything for the consumers. Now, this is the rare piece about Grenfell. Rare piece, but of course done from a property market standpoint. Is the Grenfell cladding scandal creates 2 million mortgage prisoners. Alex Aristidou owns a flat he cannot sell. An inspection this summer revealed the presence of flammable insulation on his building in Greenwich, southeast London, compounding a nightmare that began at the start of the year. Mr. Aristidou, 30, and his wife have been trying to sell their one-bedroom apartment since January, ahead of the arrival of their first child. They soon found buyers and had an offer accepted on a new home, But Mr. Aristotle's building was fitted with external cladding and without a fire safety certificate known as an EWSI or S1. Lenders refused to offer their would-be buyers a mortgage. So that is what they are talking about, not the safety of the ordinary people who don't have a property to sell or to property to buy. Now, that is, of course, a very kind of incomplete look at the Fleet Street papers today. We haven't gone through the main articles and we haven't gone through the editorials in full. In fact, we have just referred to some of them. And the reason we haven't done that is because of time. But despite that incomplete look at the front pages and some of the articles inside, the principle, the role and the contents and the editorial policies of these titles have not changed. The principles remain the same. And the principles include the fact that the Fleet Street papers, like the members of parliament, despite the fact that there are claims that Labour Party MPs are different in terms of their role from the Conservatives, but the evidence does not support that claim. The only reason why the Labour Party MPs or MPs from any other party, smaller parties, may, quote, stage difference from the Conservative MPs is because of calculations of getting the votes and to appear, to come across as being kind of not slavishly following the Conservative agenda. When the Labour Party is in power, say, for example, it was for 13 years with Blair and Brown, the Labour Party didn't follow the agenda that has been needed to end poverty, to end destitution, to end discrimination in any way, shape, or form. And in the case of housing, for example, and in the case of Tower Hamlets, the crisis of housing and homelessness and deprivation was made many times worse by the active poverty creation policy fostered by Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. So we shall be talking about the impact on Tower Hamlets and on the communities of the policies that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown imposed on Tower Hamlets, especially in this context, the imposition of two things. One is the option to have an elected mayor, and the other, of course, is even more devastating and in the same direction of taking away democratic say from the community and any safety or security on the social kind of housing front. The mass transfer of stock, housing stock, from Tower Hamlets Council as the local council to the crooks like Poplar Haque and the crooks like Tower Hamlets Community Housing. We shall be talking about that in updated forms in the next edition.